We are good to go. Folks, everybody, welcome again, and thanks a million for joining us. It is a gorgeous sunny day here today. I think a lot of Ireland seems to be quite bright. I don't know what's the weather like in Lisbon today, Carolina. I hope you're getting sunshine like we're getting. We don't always see it. Thanks a million for giving us your time and your attention. We're delighted to have you here, and a huge thanks to Mick for coming along to tell your story of how you started remote working and working with Buffer. We were just chatting before this and saying it's just such a gift for somebody to come along and share their experience and what it's been like. So without further ado, I'm going to ask Mick to give us a little bit of background on himself and tell us how did you end up in Buffer?
Thanks, Rose, and thanks everyone for coming along. So I'm going to go back to when I started or graduated college rather. In 2012, I studied digital media in Institute of Technology in Blanchardstown in Dublin. It was a very broad course, covered many different things, but like it was a little of many things and not a lot of one specific thing. So I didn't specialize in anything. So I graduated in 2012, sort of like gradually coming out of the recession. And yeah, I was competing with so many people for work, so many people who specialized in areas that they were applying for where I didn't really have that specialization. And I just wasn't getting any luck. Over the course of 3 years, I was on social welfare, like struggling to even get rejection emails, let alone interviews. I think I'd won close call with Google of all companies. Like I applied literally everywhere. And Google at the time was like my, I don't know, dream company. They were just like, you know, the biggest of Wales in tech. And I went through 7 stages of interviews there and then lost out at the final stage and was absolutely devastated. I thought that was the one thing to pull me out of the slump and depression that was unemployment for a number of years. And it didn't work out. So I was sort of resigned to the fact that I wasn't particularly like with a stale degree in terms of tech, like being 3 years old and not specializing, that I felt it was time to upskill and maybe specialize in a different area. So because I was unemployed for so long, I was eligible for a springboard course in Ireland, which is to help people sort of get back into education that have been unemployed for a while. So I studied digital marketing in a post-grad certificate in National College of Ireland, which was really good. It was a 1-year course, and the final like semester, so I think it was 3-4, I think it ended up being 6 months for me, was internship based. So I got to intern with a startup in Dublin called Head Stuff. They write a lot about like movies, film, art, poetry, humor, a bunch of stuff, do lots of reviews of things happening around Ireland as well. And it was early on in Head Stuff's journey. There was everyone was working as a volunteer, and they didn't really have marketing department. So I got to go into the ground floor and own that myself, which was a great experience. And luckily it went really well over the 6 months. Things were quite successful, got a little bit chaotic, and I was struggling to keep on top of everything myself. But knowing still startup, didn't have money to hire, I needed to look elsewhere for help, and that's where I started exploring online tools to help just manage social media, publishing content, scheduling things in advance. And I came across a number of tools, one of which was Buffer. And as I was looking there, I was kind of coming towards the end of my internship, and I knew even though things were going successfully, the money wasn't there for a job at the end of it. So as I was working in Buffer, I see this big "we're hiring" icon flash up in the top corner, and clicked it, wondering what it was. And I was blown away by what I saw. It was just a bunch of like happy, smiley people just traveling around the world, seeing pictures from company trips to Iceland, up in big bold letters like "work from home," "work remotely," all these different jobs listed of like engineers and support and marketing and everything under the sun. It was the first time I even knew you could do a lot of those jobs from home, like for a company. I knew you could do like freelance and sort of work for yourself and try to get clients and all that, but I didn't see like a big established company that, you know, I'd heard of and come across on the web, offer that for people, and it like did so many perks, and salary was good, and everything. So I mean, I applied that day for all the wrong reasons. Like I just dazzled by all the perks and everything else, and got a very kindly worded rejection email a few days later. Like it was one of the nicest emails I ever received. It was hard to be upset, but I was devastated because I fell in love with the company, and I wanted that. I wanted that work culture. I wanted that freedom. I wanted to be able to uh, travel as I worked. It was just, yeah, it was everything that I wanted. It just appealed to me so much. So I figured I didn't want to go back to the drawing board, just looking for jobs again. I sort of wrote off Buffer as something that's not going to happen, because I tried and failed. Um, so what I did was decide that I wanted to start my own business and sort of incorporate Buffer's values and Buffer culture into that, and sort of build that company for myself. No one can't reject me; it's my company. So I did that for a while. I started another course in the Entrepreneurship Academy, which is or was based in Smithfield in Dublin. Um, and it was basically an accelerated program to start your own business. And I loved that. I got to dive in, got to take the learnings from the marketing course and the internship, and I was with 40 other people starting their own businesses, and none of them were in marketing, so they all had marketing needs, so already a bunch of prospective clients. But like I got to help them learn as they were developing their own businesses. I got to just sit around the table and listen to their stories and help them with their problems and give advice. And I realized that it wasn't the marketing part that I really loved, it was the helping other people that I loved. So I sort of got a little bit not disinterested in marketing, but figured it's something I'll do for now, but not something I really want to do for later. Um, but the business was going fine. Like we were towards the end of the course, and I just thought, I'd grown so much with helping others and all the learnings on the business side and everything since I last applied to Buffer. I'm going to try again and see just if the rejection email I get this time will be like show signs of growth in the past 6 months. I'd be happy with that. Didn't expect really anything beyond that. Like Buffer at the time, we're going through a hiring craze, and I think the month before, like they had 5,000 applicants for jobs, and for the jobs that I specifically were applying for was 300 or 400 applicants. The first time when I got rejected, I was applying for a marketing position, but this time I kind of wanted something a little bit more people focused, so I applied for a customer support role. Um, I didn't have experience in customer support. Like I had a few odd jobs in retail and stuff like that before college, but I didn't have like a proper office job, company job, anything like that. So I had no expectations I'd get offered a role at this big company with thousands of applicants with no experience. So I applied, like 5, 6 weeks went by, heard nothing, just assumed they were only contacting successful applicants. Um, so I just carried on with the business stuff and started to grow that. And then I got an email out of the blue asking if I'd be up for moving on to like the next stage of interviews. And tried my best not to get my hopes up, knowing that I'm sure they sent a lot of people through this process too, and just sort of like weed out the ones that aren't quite a good fit. So I submitted like a little sort of exercise where they sent some hypothetical support questions my way, and I answered them as if I was working for Buffer. I think what really helped me there was when I started the entrepreneurship course after leaving the internship. I just, because I wanted to base everything on like Buffer's culture and value, I sort of immersed myself in that. So I consumed like every blog post they had written. And if you go on to the Buffer blog, like so transparent, like everything they talked about when they got hacked, when people left the company. In 2016, there was this huge sort of issue with layoffs, and it's all there, all warts and all, everything's listed. And you just learned so much from it because everything was just on the table. Like every success, every failure was there. So it was such a great resource. I joined the Buffer Slack community, which is similar to the Grow Remote Slack community, but had access to some of the Buffer team. So they would pop in, do like AMAs, and just have general chats, maybe get a few people to beta test some new features. And I joined Twitter chats as well that the Buffer team led. And through that, I got to meet a lot of the Buffer team, like e-meet, I guess, through Twitter and Slack. And yeah, I just immersed myself so much in it that I think by the time I applied the second time around, like I could think like a person in Buffer. I also used the product then. So I've reached out to support, and I had those examples of support questions. Buffer kindly have a tone guide online for like how they speak and communicate, and I like studied that religiously. So I eventually got through to the interview stages. And I think each interview by itself had its own sort of like technical hiccups. There was a time zone mistake where one was scheduled at like midnight my time, and I was too nervous to say anything because like this is a dream job. I don't know if this is a test or they made a mistake, but I'm gonna keep quiet. And they hopped on at midnight and immediately knew about the mistake and was so mortified. And I was sitting out in my parents' like back garden in their shed with no heating, middle of winter, with a shirt on. I could see my breath. I was hoping they couldn't see it either. It was late. I was in pajamas from the waist down. They couldn't see. Um, but yeah, it was a series of awkward interviews like that, and I was just sure nothing would come of it. Like I didn't think I was a good fit for the role. I had no experience in working remote. I was competing with so many other people, but for some reason the stars aligned and I got it. And I do think it was down to that initial sort of um, integrating myself into sort of that company's online presence, like getting involved with the company in terms of the conversations that they had with their community and stuff like that. I think maybe I was a familiar face then at that stage for whomever was like going through the candidates. I think if I didn't do that, I probably wouldn't have got to where I was. It was it was still a tricky process from there. At the time, we had like a boot camp period for new hires, and um, I had so much imposter syndrome at the time. I didn't know what I was doing. Didn't work in support, didn't work in remote. The day I joined, everyone was in a company retreat in Hawaii. So there was a 10-hour time difference. There was no one online to help me. Luckily now our onboarding is a lot better and someone wouldn't be in that position. But at the time it was so tough to ramp up and get up to speed. And I was sure after 6 weeks I'd be gone. But again, they didn't find me out, or at least that's how I felt at the time. They didn't realize they made a mistake. Um, it got a little bit better in terms of my confidence there, and I did start to feel like I belonged. Um, the support stuff went well. I progressed very well in the support team. At the same time, I started to notice that just in general, like the support team didn't have a lot of resources from elsewhere in the company. We'd be helping customers and realize it's taking like 10 minutes to find a piece of information that should only take a few seconds. And I'd start sending reports to our engineers and stuff, asking, can they do something to make this quicker and so on. And as nice as they are and they love to help, they have their own deadlines and projects, and it was very hard to get stuff prioritized. So I shared an interest with my manager a few months into my job at Buffer of wanting to learn to code, not with the plan to like be an engineer, but just so I could almost do some of the initial legwork for engineers, make it a little bit easier for them to say yes when we request like help with something, build a new tool or get some data for us quicker. But as soon as I expressed that, my manager shared that with one of the engineering managers, and things just sort of snowballed from there. They immediately reached out to me. We're so excited. Someone on support team had an interest in the technical side. I got paired with some of our senior engineers immediately. They helped me set up my development tools and everything on my laptop. And like within 2 days, I was exploring Buffer's code and like really just diving headfirst into things. Again, no plans to be an engineer, but I just started exploring things in my spare time, learning things in my spare time, and started making little contributions here and there to code, like even just text changes, stuff like that. And it's kind of built over time to little things more technical. And the support team were just like loving all these little changes, like little tweaks. It was speeding things up for them. Even if it was taking something that took 10 seconds, like take 5 seconds now, like they help hundreds of customers a day. Over time, it just really helps. So yeah, I started getting like assigned work to do and request work to do. And that's where I sort of put my hands up, probably a little bit late. I probably should have done it earlier, but said like, this is expectation now that I'm doing some coding work. Should I have this as part of my role now? And yeah, they absolutely loved that idea. They gave me like 20% of my work week would be engineering, and over the years that had sort of like transitioned to like 40% and 50%. And around this time last year, I officially moved from support to engineering. So I work 100% as an engineer now, helping our support team. So building the tools they need and fixing any issues that kind of stop them from their most optimum workflows. And yeah, that's sort of how I got to where I am at the moment.
That is, Mick, that's just amazing. And it's like to hear your story laid out like that, I'm sure, because I could see everyone else smiling and nodding, is just amazing. And actually funny, I see a lot of similarities between yourself and Rebecca Williams, who's with Automatic, and she has come and spoken to us about her journey as well. And like that, had found out about Automatic through the Grow Moat chapter here in Lewisburg. Tried the first time, didn't succeed, but like yourself, got immersed in the culture and what Automatic was about, because then she realized this is the company I really want to work for, and she was successful the second time round.
Yeah, I do think that initial sort of research helps, and it really helps if it's not always the case, and some people aren't fortunate enough to find like a job or a company they're really passionate about. But for me, that was it. I wanted to work with Buffer. Like when I was doing the business, I wasn't job searching anymore. Like it was the business or Buffer. It was nothing else. I just applied to Buffer. And that was it. And like it was Buffer's 10-year anniversary on Monday. The product is 10 years old, and we were sharing stories, and that's what I shared. Like I was just going to work for Buffer. Like I'm very laid back, very chill person, not ambitious at all. It was the first time that I can remember that I actually pushed myself to like go and achieve something. So it's like one of my proudest moments was getting that job, because like I put the work in, and I don't put the work in. Usually I'm fairly lazy. As soon as I sign off today, I'll be sat on the sofa watching Netflix for the evening. So yeah, it was one of the best things I did was decide, no, I'm gonna immerse myself. I'm gonna research the company. I'm gonna follow a few of the teammates on Twitter, and just, you know, if they ever tweet something that interests me, just reply. Just get those conversations going, and it helps so much. And I see it now. Like when I joined Buffer initially, I had some people reach out in the Slack community that I was in, and so many people working at Buffer now joined. Like were in the Slack community before they joined the team. But some people reaching out and saying like, oh my god, I got an interview, like is there any tips you could share? And yeah, like I wouldn't like walk them through like this is what you have to say and everything like that, but it was just great to, like, I was that resource for them that I had, and when I was part of the community, it was great to be able to pay it forward like that. I do think it helps so much if you like definitely do your research, but if you can be involved somehow, even just reply to tweets or you know, whatever. You were chatting, Tracy and Rose, at the start about a video someone created to help grow them out. Like stuff like that means so much to people. It gets you remembered.
Isn't that so true? Like it's, and I hadn't fully realized myself, like, okay, I know everybody isn't about Twitter, but if you're at all interested, get dug in and get into conversations in your industry and area, because people will get to know you then. And then when a role does come up, you know, it's gonna be you're far more, you're higher up in somebody's thought process then.
It is, and it doesn't have to be a case of like you're just going to join a bunch of social media channels now and your life's going to be consumed by social media. I don't post on social media anymore, very rarely. If you look at my Twitter, it's probably a few retweets from the last few years, and that's about it. I'm not super, like, I'm very much an introvert. I even doing this scares me because I've no belief that people actually want to hear from me. So I joined Twitter with the sole purpose of just getting involved in stuff like that, like putting my, I don't know, business hat or career hat on, and just wanting to make myself at least look desirable. Almost a fake it till you make it attitude, but not quite. Like I want to be as authentic as possible. I didn't want to BS my way through and say, oh, I've done all these amazing things that I never actually did. But you know, just try to have somewhat of a presence there and just make it easier. So like these companies, particularly these bigger companies, but want to do their research, like to when they see your application come forward, they'll want to check out your social media and like make it easy for them. Have something there, like I think, and whether it was right or wrong thing to do, I know before applying, I went back and I deleted some tweets from like 10 years ago or something like that that the younger me had tweeted, like just drunk pictures from night out and stuff like that. That like even if I wasn't applying for work, just seeing them like a few years later, what was I thinking? Yeah, and a lot of folks have like a professional Twitter account and a personal Twitter account, and the same for other networks. I do think it's good to have some presence. It's not the be all and end all. We've hired people who don't have that social media presence, but it definitely helps give you like an insight into someone before you get to an interview stage, and may even help you get to that interview stage where I think for me, once I got to the interview stage, I think that's when I got not grilled, but that's where they had an opportunity to see if I'd be a good fit culture wise. And I think because I didn't have that support experience, the culture side of things was so important. And it is even now at Buffer, like we've hired really experienced people, like, headhunted people from like way more experienced tech companies, and they haven't worked out because the culture side of it wasn't a good fit. So particularly for remote now, because remote's very different from an office environment. Like there are certain things you need to be able to do well, particularly communication. Like it's so key, and a lot of people aren't used to communicating like mainly through text throughout the day, and they're used to being in an office with other people, being able to just have chit chat about every day. And we still have chit chat. We chat about the weekend, we chat about what you're going to do this evening, sports, movies, all that sort of stuff, but it's all mostly text based now, so it's more inclusive of people in different time zones, and everyone can get involved, and that takes some getting used to. It definitely took some getting used to for me.
Absolutely, yeah. Same for myself as well, and I'm also an introvert. So sometimes I find, especially a lot of big online meetings, I just be drained. I love meeting people, but it can just be quite draining mentally. Like, I have loads of questions I want to ask you, but I want to open it up to everybody else to see if anybody else would like to ask a question.
Yeah, please do.
So if you want to unmute yourselves, or if you want to type into the chat. While you're gathering your questions, folks, or anything that you want to ask me, particularly interested, I was that thing of you did your first application with Buffer and then the second one. What do you think was the big difference in the mindset between the first one and the second one that helped?
Yeah, I think the first time I wanted the lifestyle. I wanted the good salary. I wanted to work from home. It didn't matter who it. Once I saw it was a thing, I just wanted it. And they had great perks for like free Kindle books and free MacBook and all that sort of stuff to get set up, and company retreats around the world and all that. And it's like, yeah, that's the life for me. So I just applied. I didn't know anything about the company and didn't even know they had a blog. I just applied. It was totally the wrong way to go about it. But yeah, sort of as I was waiting those few days for that rejection email to come, I did sort of look at the blog, and it's not like this is actually a group of people I want to work with. This is a type of work I want, and it has like it has given me that initial sort of lifestyle. I mean, I'm very boring, so like even if COVID wasn't happening, I'd be at home most of the time. But like definitely the first year of I got the job, like my girlfriend and I did some traveling around Europe. A couple of years ago, I traveled from east coast of Canada to the west coast, stopping in 10 different cities and then down to the US and back around, and like took some time off, but could also work through it because it's remote. As long as you got an internet connection and you communicate things with your team like clearly, and everyone has that expectation that this is when Mick's going to be online, this is when he isn't. Like at least at Buffer that hasn't been an issue. So like I've had so many opportunities and those company retreats where I got to visit countries and cities that I probably wouldn't have visited, if it was just up to me to go traveling somewhere. So I've definitely had elements of that lifestyle that the initial sort of selfish me wanted when I originally applied. But yeah, I think the difference between then and the second time around was I wanted to work for Buffer. If they said, we don't have these perks anymore, there's no more company retreats, I think the remote work would have been the deal breaker if they stopped doing that. But everything else was like, no, I just want to work for them. I want to work for those people, and like they were the nicest people. And part of me was worried when I joined the team, would they be as nice as they seemed on Twitter and Slack community? And they were even nicer. Like some of them are my best friends. Some of them I haven't even met in person, and they were like my best friends. It's amazing.
That's amazing, and that's so really interesting to see that your approach, how it changed. We have a question from Jonathan. I think Matthias wants to ask a question as well. Matthias, do you want to jump in there?
Yes, if you can hear me.
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Mick. This was really impressive. I've worked in career services for a long time, and yours was basically a masterclass in how to present to a class, how to basically get into a company. My question goes kind of back to your education days. what were you taught to work this way? Because it's instinctively, you seem to have done exactly the right things we've been trying to teach our clients and candidates. How did you get to this?
That's a good one. We weren't taught that way exactly. I don't recall even like a careers module of our course or anything like that. I think a lot of it was trial and error. I did have a few interviews, Google being the big one, and a couple of smaller ones. So like I've had bad interviews where, like, to be honest, I think the Google interview I didn't get, I think my downfall was that I foolishly said that I work well really alone, thinking that was great, and I came across as I wasn't like a team player. So like I've made my mistakes in that. I think it was just growth, really. Like as a person, I think I got fed up waiting for things to happen to me. Like 3 years unemployed, not having the jobs. I don't know what it is. Like I said, I'm a lazy person in general, but something pushed me to just take action and upskill and take on a course to learn more. And I think just through being around people again, because unemployed, you have no money, you don't have a social life really. So being in an environment where you're in a room full of 30 people and learning about them and working with them, and then hopping over to like a startup as an internship, which I was terrified about. I didn't have any experience in that environment. It was so new. There was no marketing budget. There was nothing. I was terrified, but I just did it anyway. And I think that's just what changed for me over the years, is that I didn't let fear stop me doing things anymore. Even today, like I was terrified coming onto this call, and it's been so nice to chat with you all. But yeah, this is something I would have said no to immediately, and I have said no to so many requests like this. I think it's just not letting the fear take over, sort of pushing myself to stop sitting on my hands and waiting for things to happen, and then just the actual like experience of doing the things, like the entrepreneurship course. Like everyone had so many different stories of being unemployed for so long, or failed businesses, or being made redundant in their jobs, all these different things, like all terrible and all struggles, like people, not to compare, but struggling like a lot worse than I was, and we're still trying to make something of themselves and get out of the situation they were in. And to being able to like sit there and like help them and help myself in the process, like it was such a huge confidence boost, because I felt like I could add value to someone else. Like I felt so worthless being unemployed for 3 years, and to be able to be in a situation where I could help someone else and help them feel like they're progressing, like it helped me so much. So by the time the second phase came around where I was interviewing, even though I didn't for like a second think I'd actually get the job, I just felt more confident. And that's why I wanted to do it. I wanted to test, like, is this confident like unfounded or not? Like, did I grow? Have I learned something over the last few months? And thankfully I did, and it got me there. But there wasn't a specific class or course or conference I went to like learn how to apply for work or interview or anything like that. I think, and like many successes in my life, I feel I fell into it in some way, but I think I had a good attitude about it. And like I definitely believe that that's key. Like I think once I changed my mindset and my attitude about it and started wanting things and putting in the work to get them, I think that's when things just really started to open up for me.
Well,
Oh my
thank you.
God.
Really exemplary. Thank you very much.
Isn't it, Matthias? And Matthias, great question. Thank you. Mick, if you hadn't said that to us, I would have been like, oh yeah, Tracy's after sending me a connection with some professional speaker, and isn't it awesome that he decided to come and give us some time for Grow Remote? So
Yeah,
fantastic. And I hear you so much on the fear end of
yeah,
things.
this is the first talk I've ever given, and I've had so many requests in Buffer, like 4 years, because we get contacts all the time from people like conferences and stuff like that, because it is like we've been doing remote for so long, very transparent company, like salaries are transparent, everything's transparent. So people want to chat to us, and I see like even in the remote Slack community that my teammate Katie is doing a talk on something coming up soon. So we get a lot of requests, but yeah, it's just never something I felt confident in doing at all. But I don't know, like
I'm so glad you're here today. So glad. Tracy, thanks for asking him. And
felt like my crowd.
Yeah, thank you so much. So Janet has a question, and she's like, can I ask where you got your digital marketing course again?
Oh yeah, it was the National College of Ireland in Dublin. I think it's IFSC. I think that's where they're based. yeah, it was only like 4 or 5 years ago, but it seems like a lifetime ago. So I was even when I was chatting with Tracy a few weeks ago, I forgot where I did the course. Like I had to go and look it up, and it was a really good course. I got so much out of it, and the people. It was just, yeah, I think career-wise, so much has evolved over the last few years. I forgot, but yeah, it was just in the IFSC in Dublin, the National College of Ireland, and it was through Springboard program. I'm not even sure, maybe you know if that's still going, but yeah, it was so helpful.
Thanks.
No problem.
Thanks, Janet. And then Nat was asking, how do you stay connected with your team and what works well and what doesn't?
Yeah, that's a really good one. And that's evolved so much at Buffer too. So we used to have, so we have like all company communication, like where, you know, maybe like CEO and a few of our executive team are communicating. So we have like an all hands, like everyone meets up. And you know, definitely the first few years they were all synchronous. We'd hop on a call at a specific time zone, but it wasn't very inclusive of people of other time zones. There wasn't the expectation they would join, but some did, and they were on at like 1 a.m. or 2 a.m. and it wasn't good. Even if they weren't expected, like we recorded them, you could watch them back, and we sort of then moved to like having those specific type of meetings. Like a couple of times. So like we'd have one at a specific time in the morning, one specific time in like my evening, and it kind of had a lot more overlap. And we now did those like asynchronously. So the team record sort of what they would have presented, I guess, in video and share it out. And we use a software called Threads. So we don't really use email anymore. We used to be so email heavy, but we use something called Threads, which is virtually the same thing. It's just easier to search and categorize and respond to things and be more transparent about it. For sort of day-to-day communication, we communicate a lot in Slack via text. We try not to hop on calls a lot. Having said that, I do have a lot of calls, but we really try to hop on them, one, if it's needed, or unless it's like maybe a social call. So I catch up with teammates quite a bit. And in my specific role now, like I'm the only one on my team. So like I'm the only engineer working for a support team, but I don't work with the support team. So that can be very isolating. So I've sort of over the past few months like reached out to other teammates who work in kind of like specialist roles, and like I've set up like recurring syncs with those, so we can sort of like check in with each other, see how they're doing, like even just over coffee. Like I'm pretty sure some of them are called like coffee chat or something like that. Sometimes we have like a gaming channel and in Slack, and some folks jump on and like play like an online game together if anyone's around. Like it's all no pressure, just, you know, if anyone's around and up for something, just to disconnect from work for a little bit, it's there. But Slack's usually kind of the go-to real-time communication we have. Some teams would have like maybe a team sync a week or a couple of times a week. In general, we've tried to move more to asynchronous communication over the past year, just to be more inclusive of other teammates who aren't in time zones that have a lot of overlap with people who, like most of our team would be mainly Europe, US, Canada. But we do want to make sure those that are in other time zones still get to contribute and get value from all the different discussions they're having. So yeah, things get done a little bit slower that way, particularly if you're waiting on decisions to be made and so on. But it's been a welcome trade-off. I think people are much happier for it. Everyone's feeling more informed and involved, and yeah, like that they can contribute to change in the company, I guess, and know what's coming down the pipeline. So it's been helpful, but it's evolved so much. I'm sure in a year's time we'll have different processes.
The whole communication thing is so interesting. And you actually mentioned at the start, Mick, how it took you time to sort of adjust to this new way of communicating. I don't know if you have any more to add on that, or...
Yeah, I think particularly text-based communication, it can be a tough one to navigate, and especially in Slack, because I think you're also working with people from different cultures, many teammates. Like we communicate in English, but that could be a second language for a lot of teammates too. So I think clarity is like really key. So we try to be really intentional that, you know, if we're leaving a message and asking someone, that we actually like ask the question. It's not implied, but we ask like, can I have your thoughts on this? Or what do you think I should do here? Or, you know, stuff that seems really basic, but when you're working with people with different languages and different slang and terminology, which is also some things we try not to incorporate, like colloquial like sayings, words, abbreviations, acronyms, all that sort of stuff. Like we tried to keep the language we use as vanilla as possible in a way, so it does less room for miscommunication. But yeah, I think another thing, and I think it comes down to communication preferences, is like if you're sending someone maybe a direct message or something like that, and some folks might say like, hey Mick, and then wait till I respond before going on to the next thing. And then like it could be a lot of back and forth before we get to the purpose, where like we very much encourage, like someone reaching out and saying, hey Mick, I was wondering if I get your thoughts on this document, if you could let me know by, I don't know, X date next Thursday, what you think, that would be great. I have everything I need in that first sentence to know what it is they want and how I can help them. And particularly when you're working with someone that's not in the same time zone, it's so key, because you could respond to that and they may not get back to it until the end of my day or the start of my day tomorrow. And like it helps to move things along if you're very clear and concise too, but definitely very clear. Like let the person know what it is you need of them, if anything.
And it's funny, I like didn't realize how poor my communication was a few years ago, and it was just gradually over working with different people that I could see communication done well. And then I was like, oh gosh, okay, I really need to get like that more concise, less slang, having an actual ask that people know, why am I sending this out in the first place? Do I need a response, or is it just, FYI, I'm keeping you
Exactly.
informed?
And there's like, sometimes you'd be writing a message in Slack and you'll think, oh, this is getting lengthy. Would this be better as an email or a thread or, a document people can leave comments on or something like that? So it's having a little bit of that awareness too. Like if you're going to be sending people, paragraphs and paragraphs of text in Slack, which ends up just getting lost as people add more conversations. It's not a great experience for you trying to have that conversation and anyone trying to find it or follow up on it. So yeah, I think that's really key. And it's like, it's okay to get things wrong. Like no one joins the team being able to communicate exactly like everyone else. Like it takes time, and I was fortunate enough to like help some of our new hires like kind of integrate into the team a little bit better. And like that had been a growing pain for some new teammates, was just kind of vague messages, not really sure if they're asking something of the person they're communicating with or not. So like it's something people help you with over time. Like we don't expect someone to join and just throw them into the deep end and they're perfect. Like it like everything else, you sort of learn these things as you just grow and become familiar with them.
Love that. John Boy, did you want to hop in and ask a question?
Yeah, it's been brilliant listening to you, Mick. Super story, and so well told. I just the bit that stuck in my head since you shared at the start was like doing fucking 7 interviews for Google, and then they said no. It's like, like what could possibly people learn in interview 7 that they didn't know in interview 6? Like it's like. And I know we're circling back. Do you know if that's still common practice in the sector? And like, I mean, that's very deflating for somebody to, because you're continuously building somebody up and then saying no. I don't think that's great. Any reflections?
Yeah, to be honest, looking back at the interviews, they were very much the same. I had 2-hour-long phone interviews, which were almost identical, just with 2 different people, and I was rehashing the same answers I'd given that person. A couple of the face-to-face interviews were quite similar too. I felt like it was the same. It was a different person asking me the same questions, as if almost they didn't trust the first person that interviewed me. So, I mean, I haven't interviewed with a lot of big tech companies. That was the main one until Buffer. And Buffer being like a remote first company too, had like a very different style. I have a friend who just got a job at Twitter, and he had to go through quite a few rounds of interviews too. I think when you're that big and that desirable of a company, you can almost afford to make the application process as strenuous as possible, because the people going through it really want it. And I think having it 7 stages of interviews might discourage the people that aren't super passionate about doing it. I don't think it's a valid or good way to go about hiring, but I wouldn't be surprised if that was a mindset for some. And what's funny is I wouldn't, like, if Google offered me a job at more money than I'm on now at Buffer, I wouldn't take it. Like, that was the dream job at the time, but I didn't know what else was out there. I didn't know the different styles of working. Like, I've turned down jobs at higher pay while working at Buffer, because it's where I want to be. It's the right environment for me. Our own interview processes have changed quite a bit. It was very synchronous at the time as well, and now we have a lot of asynchronous interviews. So we'll set up a private Slack channel with the candidate, and we'll send a list of questions their way and give them, like, I don't know, a couple of days to respond back in Slack and answer them. I think there's very few face-to-face interviews now. I think at the end, when we're pretty much sure like they're going to be a good fit, we might have a face-to-face interview, like the CEO and a few other people, just to sort of have that final confirmation. But yeah, it's a totally different process. Totally different process now at Buffer than it was 4 years ago, but even then, a totally different process at Buffer than it was at Google.
Very good. Really interested in like the fully remote recruitment process as well. It's something we have to get our heads into more and more. So thanks.
Yeah, we were really curtailed with Enterprise Ireland, kind of how they do recruitment, which is so old. Edit this bit out when you're doing your recording, Rose. But as you're talking there, Mick, like, I love that. I love your story in general, and you know that. And I think that it'll prove really valuable for other people. Great thing about this is it's scalable, and we can send this recording to people who've been unemployed for years. It's like, no, Mick did it, so you can do it. So that's how we'll be using this in future. But just one quick question for you, Mick, and maybe you covered it, but values of Buffer. Like, obviously you were very hooked in before you even got in, right? And I suppose, what are the values at Buffer that got you so hooked up to it?
Yeah, there was a few. So I think the transparency, like defaulting to transparency was a huge one, because it just seemed really familiar. Like, you don't tell people how much you earn. You don't, if your company was hacked, you try to keep that as quiet as possible, all this sort of stuff. Now I think there's more of an obligation, like these days, that you have to communicate that, but like they were doing that anyway. I think the culturing, like positivity, was a huge one. I think I've had a few unpaid internships outside of this sort of like journey I've told you, where like through like my initial degree and everything, and they weren't great. Like, the office environment wasn't great. There was a lot of politics. There was it wasn't a very nice environment to be in. And like, even me as like a white straight male being in a workplace environment that wasn't very welcoming and a bit toxic, like I can't imagine how it was for other people. So I didn't want that, and everything I saw at Buffer suggested that wasn't the place. And then I think we've rolled into another value now, but it was a value called but I think it was bias towards action. And I think that was just the mentality. Yeah, that was the mentality I was in then, when I was fed up with waiting for things to happen. So it just spoke to me. And yeah, but the values have evolved over time too. But they're what spoke to me most. I think they really just made me feel like this was somewhere I could belong, somewhere that these were my people. Like these were people who will be nice to each other, be kind to each other, trust each other. And that's it. Like, I can go on. Like I've had conversations in Slack with friends, just like, like I had a terrible night's sleep, or I haven't slept in 2 days, and they'd be like, take the day off, and I'd take the day off, and it's no biggie. Like, they really put people first, and that's been so huge. Like, I think they've earned my loyalty just through how they've developed this company culture where everyone looks out for each other. There's no company politics. There's no, oh, that person's up for a job I want, I hope they don't get it, or anything like that. It's very much we help each other, and someone else's success is all of our success. It's a really great environment.
Isn't it amazing that that's kind of extraordinary, and it's a bit of a pity, but it's stunning to see a company like Buffer just do it so well. And as you can guess, we're all a huge fan of bias for action around these parts. And Matej's just made a point there about, he's saying a lot of recruitment in larger companies is rejection management, so it's filtering candidates down. And I think it's so valuable to make this visible, what the recruitment processes look like for people, so people know what they're facing into. And even like that, you can hear in your story, it was a big shift in mindset that made a huge difference in your career journey. Nasa's a lovely question. What did your work week look like, and how many hours do you do, and does it vary week to week, and do you work weekends?
I don't work weekends at all. I've done the occasional day when I was asked and told to take a day off because of it. It's very good. We were very strict, like minimum 3 weeks holidays, but last year I took 18 and I got a message saying I didn't take enough holidays. Go take more holidays. The actual work week, it varies. I think when I first started I did more than I should, and once my manager found out how much I was working, they asked that I stop. But I was working like I think it was like 8 to 6, which was a ridiculously long day. I know folks work longer, but it's not a healthy work week when you're doing that 5 days a week. I think because it was remote, I was sort of using my commute time as work time, which isn't good. That's not what remote work is. You don't just and like I worry and hope that it's not the case for a lot of the kind of non-remote first companies that have had to go remote this year. Like that isn't an expectation we ever had, that because you don't need to commute into the office, you can use that commute time to get some work done. So I'd scale back. I generally work like I start my day at 9 and then I end sometimes between 5 and 6, depending on the day. Like sometimes I might have a catch-up call with a friend that lives on the West Coast or something like that. So I'll hang on a little bit. That's West Coast of the US, I should clarify. It'd be okay to have a call with someone from Galway during my day. But yeah, so I work. Well, I suppose one of the things this year, and another thing I'm really grateful for, is that we, after kind of COVID took over all of our lives, we've switched to a 4-day work week to sort of help protect the mental health of a lot of the teammates. So we've been doing a 4-day work week since May, which has been huge, and miraculously, like we're still getting the same amount of work done. So I'd love for us to explore that, but we've been doing it as an experiment for the rest of the year, and I think we're deciding in the next few weeks if it's something we want to make permanent or not. I know our CEO is a huge fan of it and has been loving it, so I'm hopeful it will. But yeah, I tend to work about maybe with the 4 days, I don't know, 30 to 35 hours depending on it. No weekends, lots of vacation time, time off at Christmas and other holidays. Everyone's encouraged to take their own country's holidays off and religious holidays off, so we try to be inclusive of everyone's different holidays. So yeah, it's not a stressful job in terms of like the hours and even the work. Like it's such a joy to work with the people I work with. There are stresses, like even now I'm currently in like a stressful period where I just have a lot to do and we're coming to the end of the year and not enough time to do it all. But yeah, it's like compared to family and friends I have who work, like I feel almost guilty talking about work because they have so many different troubles and commutes and long hours and expectations that they're going to take their work home with them or work weekends, and I don't have that. It like really is a sort of people first kind of work culture. Yeah, like I've even today I've said I'm just a bit tired. I haven't been sleeping well the last couple of days, and I was told to take some time off. Like it's a really great place to work. So yeah, I'm not overworked in that sense in terms of work week. I think it's a very sustainable amount of hours.
Absolutely love that. And again, thanks a million for taking the time to join us today, considering you've so much going on, but it's hugely appreciated. Love the move that you've made with the four day work week. And it's definitely seems to be catching on with more companies, organizations and governments around the world. So let's keep it going. Did anybody else want to hop in with anything before we tie up?
I'm in no rush, and feel free to also reach out to me, like if you think of something later on. I'm in the Grow Remote Slack community and Twitter and whatever.
Thanks, Mick. I have a couple of kind of like the real general questions, but the ones I really like is what you know about your remote working life now surprised you compared to what you thought it might have been like?
Yeah, and in some ways positive and negative. I thought I'd be a lot more outgoing and traveling all around the world and stuff, and I sort of did it for a little bit, and I was like, no, I like Ireland. I want my own little comfy place that I like literally never leave except to go to the shop. And I'm happy enough with that. So I expected I'd be like just traveling around the world, and I have, like, fortunately since I worked at Buffer, had opportunities to go traveling, and it's been wonderful. But like I think I've also had my fill like outside of of Buffer work. Yeah, I mean, it's so I didn't know what I was getting into when I joined. Just like when I joined the company, it was only a few months out there, and knew this type of work existed. So I went in skeptical. I thought Buffer was a prank. My parents thought Buffer was a prank for like 2 years of working there. They thought it was just a scam. So I'm surprised with how much I loved it, in the sense that I think I'd be miserable if I went back to an office environment after this. It's been such a huge life-changing decision. Like even the small things, like just before this call, we got a delivery from the postman. I was able to run down and get it. If I was in an office, we'd miss that. Stuff like that. We've got teammates who are parents and have kids, and you're talking to girl and the kids sitting there in their lap, and it's no big deal. Like they work while taking the kids. If they have a school meeting, whatever, they just hop out and take it, and they can or don't have to like make up the work after. It's not a huge deal. Like we kind of acknowledge that there's things in life that get in the way of work, and like they're more important. Go do those things. So yeah, and I know there's probably office environments that might have that mindset too, but I don't know. It ticks all the boxes for me. I don't think I could possibly go back to not working remotely. Like, and I know there's some jobs that are remote, but like the occasional trek into Dublin for the office and stuff like that, like even that would turn me off. Like I think you're remote or you're not, and there's very few reasons why, particularly in the industry that I'm in, that you need to go into an office and stuff like that. Of course, you can't have hospital workers and everything working remotely. It just doesn't work. There's a need somewhere. But for so many jobs, and I have so many family members who have been like, I don't know if you remember, like for those that are here in Ireland, like we had County Kildare that had like a huge spike in cases, and everyone was told don't go there. And I had a family member who had to go into her office in Kildare to work every day, and it was just like there was that. And she works on a computer all day, like answering emails and so on. It was the most ridiculous thing. I think there's so many opportunities to have people working remotely and doing it well. I think, or at least I'm hoping that one of the bright sides of this awful year is that we'll get more companies doing that. And it'll be like a hard transition. There needs to be a lot of trust. I know there's a lot of distrust around, how do I know if my employees are doing the work if I can't see them doing the work? That's a whole separate mentality and mind shift that I think needs to happen. But I don't see any like huge legitimate reasons why a lot of these office jobs can't go fully remote.
I agree with you so much. My sister is in that situation where she was being forced to travel to her office, and it was just ridiculous. There's if anybody's come across Laurel Farr, so she's been a fantastic supporter of ours from early. She's a remote work advocate in the States that's been at this for over a decade. And what she says is, I don't need to watch you wash my car to know my car is clean. And it's like, outputs should show whether the work is getting done or not. And Matthias added, by the way, of all the things that you get to pay attention to and spend time with when you're remote working, there's cats.
Yeah, I was just about to reply. We have so many Buffer pets on calls and so on. We have a Buffer Pets channel, and yeah, I think sometimes we even just have calls for the pets. And we've had calls where it's like everyone bring in like your significant other or your parents. We've had company retreats where like one of my teammates brought her mother, and we got to meet her mother, spend a week with her mother. It was brilliant. Yeah, it's a very nice sort of family friendly, inclusive place. So yeah, you get to see all sorts. I've had
sign me up.
Yeah, I've had. I remember my first call, my first lead. His whole family hopped on because they wanted to hear my Irish accent. It was bizarre, but also like really great way to sort of introduce myself to teammates and families and so on. It's a really good environment.
I absolutely love it. Mick, thanks a million for joining us today. I have like, so yeah, I love, everyone's nodding away. I have so genuinely enjoyed this session. It's fantastic. It's lovely to meet you. I don't doubt we'll get to see you again.
I hope so.
Come back in and hang out, and I can't wait to meet everybody face to face in 2021. Nessa, you're only down the road, so we definitely have to. But again, everyone, thanks a million for joining us today. I'll have the recording up a little bit later onto YouTube, and yeah, really enjoyable way to spend my lunchtime. So absolutely huge amount of thanks from me, and we'll talk to you all soon. Have a great week, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. It's been a pleasure.